Mm.
Hello, hi everyone.
Hi guys.
Hello, hi, hello to our students. Hello everyone. So let's just the first thing that we want to ask before welcoming everyone is is the audio good? Can you hear us properly? Yes? Okay, great. Okay, let's get started. Welcome everyone to our lecture series, Young Prototypes, number 5 today. And welcome to our guests, Pablo Menendez, Hector, Pablo Delgado, Iñaki, Stefan Sauter, who represent Ofmake and Zulo, and Stefan Sauter, and who are our lecturers today. So today is our first back-to-back lecture. And just for those of you who are joining us for the first time, Young Prototypes is a lecture series, part of our seminar that we are leading together with Frank BARKOW, Laura Salazar, and I in Montana State University this semester. And we're kind of exploring the notion of experimental design research as an area of architectural production, bringing together the voices of international emerging practices. And we're kind of trying to foreground generational approach, let's say, through thinking and building as inextricable modalities of operating as architects today. And before I pass on the mic to Laura for the introduction of our guests today, I will just remind everyone that after the lectures, there will be a discussion led by our students and moderated by Chris Brizolara today, one of our students. So feel free to raise your hand or unmute and ask questions or write down in the chat any questions that come up. During the lectures. The presentation order will be first Stefan Sauter and then Ofmake and Zulo. And the lectures will be back to back. So the discussion will be after the 2 lectures are over. We're also reminding everyone that we are recording this session, and now I will pass on the mic to Laura for the introductions.
Hi everyone. So I'm really excited to be introducing the people today, starting in order of presentation. So starting by Stefan Sauter. Stefan is a shapeshifter. He's a project architect at BARKOW in Berlin. He is a curator responsible for running the Schaufenster, the office's exhibition space. He is a researcher who has collaborated with Niklas Mack and AMO, most importantly on the Countryside exhibition at the Guggenheim. He was a fellow at Strelka, an intensive design research program based in Moscow right before the war broke out. And so Stefan is a shapeshifter. He is multi-mediated and in a constant state of evolution, investigating beings, objects, technology, and places. And then we are joined also by Ofmake. Ofmake is a collaborative platform for Hector Termenon, Iñaki Perez, and Pablo Menendez, as they share work, ideas, and resources across Berlin, the Canary Islands, and Galicia. Their collaboration has been honored with numerous awards and competitions, most notably the first prize for a social housing project in Seville, and another housing proposal in Norway, which originated with an Europan competition. Zulo is a project of theirs, and it's a gallery in the Canary Islands run by Iñaki Perez and Pablo Delgado, which provides a space for local artists. Their programming has fomented a new platform for discourse around contemporary issues in the region and beyond. And so we think that the combination or like the adjacency between Zulo and Ofmake provides a very interesting kind of feedback loop between a practice that is invested in the culture of building and one that is producing culture through an arts community. And so since we have a back-to-back session today, like Pablo has pointed out, we're going to kick it off with Stefan, and Ofmake / Zulo will follow up immediately after, to be concluded with a discussion moderated by our student, Chris Brizzolara. And so to begin, Stefan will be addressing heads-on a question which is super critical to our seminar. What is the role of design research in contemporary practice? So I will hand the mic to you, Steph, now.
Great. Thank you, Laura, so much. Laura, Pablo, and Frank, really, it's super nice to be here with you, and these formats are incredibly exciting to see what's happening out there. And clearly there's a lot, so it's really great that you're kind of making this collection of new ideas and thinkers. So I'm going to share my screen now. And so today what I want to do is talk a little bit about dictionaries. And I'm of course not a writer or an expert on dictionaries, but what I want to do is to kind of like think about dictionaries as kind of prototypes or something that we can use as a design research process. To put it in other words, I want to present design research as a kind of encyclopedic process. However, I would like to use this term of dictionary in a rather loose sense to something that would include groupings of things such as atlases, surveys, bestiaries, lists, indexes, catalogs, mood boards, archives, collections, the internet. So a very broad sense. So if we look at Umberto Eco, he says, the list is the origin of culture. It's part of the history of art and architecture. What does culture want? To make infinity comprehensible. It also wants to create order, not always, but often. And how, as human being, does one face infinity? How does one attempt to grasp the incomprehensible? Through lists, through catalogs, through collections in museums, and through encyclopedias and dictionaries. We also have completely practical lists, the shopping list, the will, the menu. These are all also cultural achievements in their own right. So I don't know how many of you, but this inquiry comes a little bit from the way that I learned architecture through these kind of like traditional architecture surveys that, if you think about them, they sort of go back to books such as this one, like the 10 books of architecture, like Vitruvius, that are in some way or another the format of Vitruvius. And of course, I'm going to go with really big brush strokes here, and it's not comprehensive at all, but it's kind of like, it's just me prototyping an idea. And we see these histories of mostly Western focused histories of guys, and it's mostly guys in these surveys, like Villardejo and Kurt, with these portfolios that kind of attempt to explain structure in the Middle Ages of cathedrals, or Leon Battista Alberti, again with the 10 books of architecture in the Renaissance, or Viollet Duc with a dictionary of French architecture, who was trying to study the structural rationalism in French cathedrals. And from there, you would get these kind of like overview explanations of architectural history in a kind of linear way that would just try to explain the world or grasp infinity. And then you would get somebody like Gottfried Semper saying these are the types of primitive huts, who would then influence people like John Ruskin, who wants to document all the stones of Venice and all the kind of ornament and craft that you can find in cities. And then this kind of encyclopedic approach we find at the beginning of the 19th century through somebody like Abi Warburg, who starts collecting images of the Renaissance to kind of create a comprehensive history through works of art. All of this to then be taken up by people like Siam, the Athens Charter, and kind of creating their own new dictionaries, their own new vocabularies of what architecture should be, how to embrace industry, how to come up with cities that are hygienic, a whole new vocabulary, who by the end start getting questioned by people like Siam and Team 10, as early signs of like a new incoming age of postmodernism, to then really have this whole history be reinterpreted by people like Charles Jenks, and the list goes on. Bernard Rudowski, hey, what about architecture that is not done by architects? How can we integrate all the history of women in architecture? What are we missing out? How do we integrate voices that have not been properly integrated? So in recent years, we're trying to infinitely expand this encyclopedia and to kind of like take control of knowledge and the way that architecture traffics and how we learn it and how we kind of update the canon. And then we see exciting practices like Ben and Hila Besher, who prototype industrial anonymous architecture. And with the internet, we can catalog everything. We can catalog a series of koi fish, types of concrete blocks, types of chains, morphologies, everything you ever owned. Kind of the list is endless, to the point that we can get to a series of the Little Miss figures where everything is included. So a little bit of my interest in encyclopedias comes from an author, a French author called Georges Bataille. And his analysis is that during the time that architecture as a profession was starting to kind of consolidate itself through the master masons of Gothic cathedrals, it was the same time that knowledge was also being kind of consolidated with scholasticism through books and encyclopedias. If we think the 13th century is a century of encyclopedias, surveys, pictures of the world, but it's also the same time where the whole knowledge of the world is being put into buildings as a way to try to grasp and understand the world around us. But Georges Bataille is interested in this format of dictionaries and encyclopedias, not as a way to totally grasp the totality of what is happening in our world, but instead he tries to use this format through writing and to try to poke holes in kind of like established discourses that exist. He believed that architecture sometimes can become quite rigid and kind of becomes a sort of imposing social order. And sometimes when we think about architectural production, it is true that certain ideas become kind of codified and repeated, and to the point that we even have very technical dictionaries of how architecture is done. But as a way to loosen it up, Bataille used writing through kind of dictionaries to destabilize the system from within. So we can think of Bataille as somebody who is kind of anti-architectural, anti-discursive. He wants every statement that becomes fixed, he wants to basically kind of unwrite it and destabilize it. And you basically can never get like a fixed statement from him. But Bataille was part of a generation that around the 30s, that kind of reacting to this sort of linear trajectory of history, started making a series of nonsense dictionaries. Writers start making deliberate grammatical errors. They invent words that belong to no dictionary. they become quite illegible. Nobody understands them anymore. They make badly constructed sentences. No one understands them anymore. It becomes the Tower of Babel. They were inspired by kind of things from the Middle Ages, these patracies. They're basically nonsense poems from carnivals that played with language and tried to like evoke materiality and lose meaning more than anything rather than convey it. And there were a few of these dictionaries that started appearing during the 1920s and 30s. The first one by Michel Léris, which is a dictionary or a glossary that tries to make the word flow directly into the meaning of the word or the definition. So kind of make the meaning and the word porous and flow into itself, so that the materiality of the word would be emphasized rather than an associated meaning. The second one was the Dictionnaire Critique that Georges Bataille himself participated in, where here the dictionary doesn't want to define the word, but wants to point out what job the word does. And then in the 60s, we find other examples from somebody like Otto Pine from the Zero Group, where he started to create kind of a mock dictionary and create prototypes and concepts with sketches, images, but also definitions, quite elaborate definitions of things that he's interested in, what he thinks is an exhibition, what he thinks is architecture, what he thinks is a fair, what he thinks are people, basically forcing yourself to describe and to create associations. Sorry. But for me, one of the most influential was another one around this time by Gustave Flaubert. He wrote a book called The Dictionary of Accepted Ideas, which documented cliches in society, kind of define things that are so common to the point that by describing them, they become absurd. And I received this knowledge of how to use dictionaries in a design research sense through an architectural thinker and theorist, Enrique Walker. And he started to look at what are the cliches in architecture, what are the things in our vocabulary that are so ingrained and so obvious, for example, cantilevers or expressive envelopes or barcode facades, these things that are kind of obvious in our architectural vocabulary. And perhaps by really defining them and trying to describe what it is that they do, sometimes you can poke a hole or find some gaps for that can open up some original ideas. And with this is where I started a kind of way of thinking that is the one that I've carried onto a lot of my projects since my undergraduate thesis. I created myself a dictionary for the city of San Jose, where I'm from, Costa Rica. It's a city that it's very difficult to read because it represents what Latin American cities are, which are quite chaotic, unplanned, and also responding to issues of insecurity. And in this case, I found that the most important architectural element in the city of San Jose is the fence. Everything is a fence, and architecture responds by adapting. So I created a kind of vocabulary of how does this mechanism, this envelope, adapt itself to the context to create moments of enclosure, moments of security, more porous. And it kind of became a process by which I would start to face design as a core kind of encyclopedic and dictionary way. I also, during my time at the Canadian Centre for Architecture, I had an internship. And here I worked on an exhibition or analyzed and did some writing about an exhibition of Herzog de Meuron that was called Archaeology of the Mind, that precisely was documenting this kind of morphological, encyclopedic, almost natural history approach of Herzog and de Meuron's design in architecture, forms that have an evolution, materials that kind of, they're categorized, and there's a comparative analysis to them. And then from there, I've kind of taken this approach in studios that I did at Harvard with Iñaki Ábalos, where we had to design infrastructure for a gravel pit in Spain, and using a found object like this concrete kind of piping systems, how to create with the same basically syntax different structures that could be one more enclosed, another one could be kind of set up against a barrier as a sort of an opening, and how to use the same element but to create a catalog of design elements. In the same way, in a studio with Mark Lee and Sharon Johnston at the Menil campus in Houston, we studied the Menil campus and how each of the pieces of architecture here kind of compose a lexicon, compose a syntax, all saying something different, but they with a unique personality, but together they form a kind of collection, or they create a world. And this was my contribution to this project in cross-laminated timber, and how to push a kind of prefabricated material to its edges, and by using very simple constraints, how to create something that might be a little bit unexpected. At the same time, at the work at BARKOW Leibinger, we are often used to studying these kind of, or creating dictionaries for ourselves. Our work with Laura at Hansen College, we were looking at architecture that belongs to classical periods, to modern, postmodern, contemporary, in an attempt to discover a language of our own, but that still fits a broader definition. We kind of create these sort of dictionaries for ourselves to discover morphologies, to see what would fit the best. And now with the work at Schaufenstedt, I kind of we've been having a lot of fun with the way that Frank kind of creates these documents of research, which is some files of literally binders of ideas, and kind of an encyclopedic approach. And we've been trying to build and display some of these models in the gallery, but it's kind of like an incomplete, endless list. And more current, recently I'm working with my family to also approach the rapid development of the Pacific coast in Costa Rica, that we have the image of Costa Rica being something like this, very tropical and kind of full of wildlife. But the reality of it through tourism is that there is quite unequal and very rapid development. So I'm also trying to develop an encyclopedia and language of how to create a project with my family of a series of a kind of campus of regenerative hospitality and research centers using regenerative forest materials, so timber construction. So these are some practical uses of it, but I guess what I want to leave you with from Georges Bataille, one of his contributions in this dictionary of the documents number 2 was the idea of formlessness, which is precisely what a dictionary can't do. Dictionaries try to stabilize things, but in his dictionary, he emphasized the notion of formlessness, which is precisely what dictionaries want to repress. And it's kind of like an exercise of infinite incompletion. It's kind of trying to catch the horizon as much as if you try to catch a concept, you will escape it. And this is what I try to do with just all of my research projects. They're really just files that I use. I will give you 2 tools that are really important to me. I don't know if you guys use Arena, but Arena is great to just compile, like basically make your own dictionary and encyclopedia of images. It's free, it's really nice. I use it all the time. And Notion, you can kind of like dump ideas through with a calendar. So kind of just use time as a kind of organizer as well. But in the end, I think what I have to leave you is you have to create your own dictionary, and you can take existing definitions of architecture and you can work with them kind of against the grain so that you can destabilize them. But then you also have to create your own interest and kind of your own lexicon so that, yeah, you can kind of, instead of following these kind of linear visions of architectural history that are like one thing after the other, create a kind of refreshing non-contemporaneity and create your own concepts. So that's where I will leave it. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot, Stefan. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And then I'm sure we got a lot of questions for you, but let's go with the next presentation first, and then we'll get to those. So, caballeros, you guys ready?
Okay, now, right? You hear me? Okay, cool. Okay, so first of all, thank you very much, Laura, Pablo, and Frank. I mean, we're more than glad to be here presenting some part of what we do, and I hope you like it. So we're gonna talk about, we're gonna show the work we do with Ofmake and Zulo. So Ofmake is a collaborative architectural practice between Pablo Menendez, Iñaki Perez, and me. And then Zulo is kind of a product between Ofmake and Pablo Delgado, Delnu, that is also today here with us. And so the title we gave to the talk is Dialogic Archives, because in a way we understand our ideas as our projects as an archive of ideas that we use again and again, and they pop up always, and just create a dialogue between us and the people we work with, and I hope also today with you. Okay, okay. So this diagram in a way shows the space that exists between Ofmake and Zulo. That is determined by many collaborations with architects, friends, and people we like to work with, such as Salazar, SEQUERO Medina, Soto Ordóñez, Mafia Atelier, and Delnu, and is also the content of this talk. So since we work delocalized from Berlin, Canary Islands, and A Coruña, we like to, not always, but we try to do this kind of digital sketches in order to start a design discussion between us, and also with other friends, as in this case, we developed this project with, or this proposal with Salazar, SEQUERO Medina, and Soto Ordóñez. And we start from the very, very far distance, having this kind of idea and different connections from the plot and the different points or the parts we wanted to highlight in the city. And we went from a very far distance to this kind of very detailed concept section that will show the different layers and different types of lights that we wanted to put together with kind of a commercial public tower or a landscape condenser that in the end up being a proposal that we did all together for this competition in the Sevilla that we won the last year, or in other cases, these build projects that we are in this time doing in the Canary Islands with Pablo Delgado. And this is an intervention in a very fascinating house from the 60s that that is now under construction. So with the same strategy, working through the scales and having a system, we developed this project in 2017 for a competition in Norway that for us was very important because it's kind of the starting point of our own collaboration as Ofmake. So this consists in a technocratic system that we superimpose on top of this heterogeneous scenario. So the whole project or the whole intervention was all this area that we had to solve and was kind of, so what we suggest was this kind of connection from the city center to the seaside. But the main part or the main goal of the competition was to solve this part here that was 300 living spaces for students. And so what we proposed were these 6 bars solving the slope from the upper part to the knee that there are somehow like 15 or 17 meters. So this proposal let us continue working with the city, with the municipality, and with the urban planning of the city. So we went to the site to visit the place. This is the slope I was telling you about of these 15 meters from the top to the lower part. And these are the views from the highest point, so that we were very fascinated. So the concept that we developed was kind of a very a plinth that will, in a way, solve the problem with slope, and having on top this grid. And then the triangular shape of the plot we will solve with these 2 cores that will mix in this way. So the core number, letter A, was 240 square meters and B was 120. Both of them were multiple of 3, and one was the half of the other. So in the upper part we'll have like the pure A, underneath the pure B, and we will mix it in a way that we will have a step back of 3 meters on each side all the time. So the plot that was given to us will be like optimized as much as possible, and developing always many possibilities on each of the cores. We gave, in the end, a solution of low density, regular density, and high density to the client. So the client could negotiate with the user and with the city the possibility of having 150 units, 175 or 200, because they didn't know what they wanted to have. So in the end, that's how the floor plans will look like. So every unit had like 2 sides orientation. The wet areas were in the middle, giving a lot of freedom to the facade, and every unit will have views to the fjords with these winter gardens on the sides. So these were the last 4 bars instead of the first 6 bars that we developed at the beginning. And here we can see how the slope, how we were negotiating the slope with the plinth, and how the public areas will be connected through the spaces in between. So this is the model we developed in the end that will sum all these different aspects that we were talking about. So the plinth, these big openings, and then the grid on top, and having the big pitch roof on top.
Well, for continuing the tema that Hector was playing a little bit at the beginning, the collaboration as the work methodology, The next project is a project we did together with our friends from Mafia Atelier. Mafia Atelier is an architectural practice based in Berlin and Zurich, led by Maria Zaha and Philip Bain. And in this case, the project is a very small house in the south of Germany for a family composed of 4 members that decide to buy this very little house with a very beautiful garden in front. And next slide. Yeah, with this very beautiful garden in front. And the first idea was, the requirement of the client was to do a little extension of this house in order to solve 2 things, basically. That was to have a solution for the entrance to the old house, or a better solution to the entrance to the old house, and also to solve a little bit the relations to the garden, that it was not really having the using the potential of the garden that it really had. So we decide now in the implementation, you see how we build this very tiny pavilion of 40 square meters. The entrance, we solve it through the corner of this L-form pavilion, and the relation with the garden, we kind of solve it with a very open facade that kind of build a transition in between the garden and the house. For this project, we like very much to explain it from the through the construction site pictures, because one of the conditions that the client kind of imposed at the beginning when we got the commission was that the project had to be as far as possible built by themselves. So we kind of thought that this could be a problem kind of when we heard this proposal, because it requires a certain type of intensity of us in the construction site and the supervision that everything is built as we would like to have it. But then we start understanding that this requirement of simplicity and the detail of the construction was giving the project a sort of an honesty, so that we can really see in this picture. So this is built. The project was built, or is getting built almost 70% by the client. So, and here we can see the opening we did in the old building in order to build a relationship with the pavilion. And the next picture, I guess, we see here the foundation of the pavilion. Here we see the client putting, I mean, they don't have any experience in construction or architecture, but they kind of were improvising with us at the same time. And here in the next picture, we can see we decide to demolish a structural wall dividing these 2 rooms, and we modified the entire structure system of the house through this cross beams solution in order to build a kind of, to give more flexibility and utility to this room. Yeah, exactly. Here we can see it a little bit more, the solution. In the ground floor and the floor plan, we see how we try to keep the structure of the original building as much as we could. This is kind of composed by a sequence of these 3 rooms. As you see from right to left, the first space is kind of the entrance, toilet, stairs, etc. Then it's lead to a little kitchen that we connect through this opening that you saw before with the living room. And then you see how the little pavilion, that you see how small it is. This little pavilion positions it in the middle, in between the garden and the old house. In the upper floor, the structure is basically the same. It's like the sequence of 3 spaces, in this case 2 little rooms for the kids, and a bigger room for the couple. And in the section you see again this the simplicity of this construction, right? The original building is a very traditional German countryside house made by brick and wood flooring, and the pavilion that we propose is kind of like a very solid foundation used directly as a flooring, and then a very simple wood construction. The next picture, I guess, yeah, this is the day when we, the beginning of the summer, when we put the scaffolding in the building. And then the next picture kind of is the picture we took in our last construction site visit, where they already built the windows, and then you see what we mentioned before, you see the simplicity in this space, and also with a lot of mistakes that were happening in between. But then when we finally saw this picture, then we really thought that our concept kind of, when we try to express with a very simple, honest construction, what we tried to get, it was like this garden suddenly were really connected to the house. We kind of felt that we achieve it. And yeah, this is the state right now of the building. They are getting, if guess in the next months, we will get build the facade, and yeah.
Those weren't your beers on the table, were they?
Yeah.
I was joking.
yeah, they're probably they were getting maybe get some drinks while building. Yeah, most likely, yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna talk about Zulo, which is a project we've done in collaboration with Pablo Delgado, who is also here with us, and he will talk the second part about Zulo also. So this is a project that was developed during the COVID-19 pandemic. And as many of you may know, here we had in Spain like really severe restrictions, which limited our opportunities to meet with friends or to do any plans in physical spaces. So yeah, we kind of got fed up of this digital space where we could about hangouts and so on in video meetings, and we decided to find a space where we could create a safe space where restrictions were still happening, but we could cope with them. So we had the opportunity to use a really small room, which was originally a storage room for two restaurants in a really centric street of Las Palmas de Gran Canaria in the Canary Islands. Yeah, the owner, well, we got to an arrangement with the owner so we could use half of the space, and that he could still use the other half for storage purposes. So the arrangement was for 1 year, and during that 1 year, we decided to use the space as an art gallery. Yeah, so we were both architects and clients in this case. And not only that, we also had to build it with our own hands. So yeah, so we decided to do like really a small intervention, which consisted in 3 main elements. One was the silver curtain, which divides the space in 2. So it's like a really simple gesture. Maybe it's like a really little architectonical decision, which made a really big impact in the room, actually. And the other 2 elements were a new lighting concept, which could work for the art gallery. So it had to be like a really neutral light, and also a flooring system which had to protect the existing wood flooring. So we used really a simple Pirelli rubber flooring, and with these 3 elements, we created a really neutral space, which it was kind of it worked as an empty box, but it had this this special thing, or this controversial use, which was like it had to be storage room at the back part for a restaurant, but also an art gallery in the front. So it was it was about the details, few elements, and this was the space. So then we had like the art concept, the use of the art gallery, and throughout some meetings with local young artists, we decided to have not only like art exhibitions, but also we asked the artists to collaborate with us in transforming the space in a specific way. So here, for example, as you can see in this picture, the artist, which is called Jonay Pematos, is from Gran Canaria. He decided to transform the scale of the space just by using a really simple element, which was the plastic he uses for to paint. So he didn't have to go further on, but use his own elements from his atelier, so he would transform our own art gallery. Then we had other artists like Carlos. He decided to create a black box inside our art box. That's our art gallery, and because he is audiovisual artist. His work is it's mainly video, so he needs like a really dark space. So yeah, he decided to create like this black space. So it's with also few elements, like introducing new curtains. And then we had also another artist, Luna Bengochea, who's also from Gran Canaria. And her main focus in art, she's a landscape artist. And she decided to bring one of her big landscape pieces to scale 1:1 into the small space of Zulo. It was really interesting because she used salt from the Fuerteventura salt mines, and also at the time we had a volcano explosion in the Canary Islands, so she brought directly the ashes from the volcano to the space. So it was also like really something that in our city it was like really got quite in the news. So it was like really nice intervention. And yeah, we didn't only want the space to show the art pieces, so we decided like also to kind of arrange other actors in scene. And the case we used Valvara, it's a radio program which Pablo Delgado is the chief, and he decided to bring artists from the local music scene, most of them from the electronic underground scene, and they played music according to the art exhibition which was held in that month. So here we can see like these local musicians, and they were like intervening and kind of were playing music with the art pieces. So I will now let Pablo explain a second part of Zulo.
Thanks, Iñaki. So now that the project is over, with some distance, we have begun to think of what happened with more critic look, which we will summarize. First of all, which may seem quite obvious now, but which we never consider it, is the relationship between public space and private, or the non-existing boundary or the slightly boundary between them. From the beginning, to explain that, why it wasn't quite obvious for us. From the beginning, we had a hard time thinking about how the visits to the exhibitions were going to be developed due to that COVID restrictions. So we decided to hire the service of a booking website, and we organized them in small groups of 3 visitors every 15 minutes. So you can imagine mask, distance, etc. So that's what we had to do. So we were focused and worried about that, but it was in the street, the open space where the real exchange happen. So the talks, the debates, sharing beers. So the second thing to highlight as a consequence of the first, it was the collaborations from that casual exchange on DJ Friday afternoons. For example, in that picture, we can see the artist Estefania Batista collaborate with the artist Jonaipe Matos, nowadays in different projects. Both presented their individual works also in Zulo. And a different case of connections between an artist and a visitor. Octavio Barrera, who is an industrial designer, started to work with Gabri Perez, a metal worker in different furniture design projects in Lanzarote, Hierro, Gran Canaria. So in another hand, the Architects Association of Tenerife invite us to present Zulo. So in a way to recreate Zulo in an abstraction exercise, we built a floating curtain in the style of Mies and Lily Rates for the Café Santum. And we also designed a elements with a photographic selection of the different exhibition. And also highlight the collaboration with the project Bailar la Ciudad, a study of local celebrations and parties in the public space, which culminate in the presentation of the book that brought out all the research to an end. Next, Hector. So also thinking about what happened with this two different use of the space. So that multiple space, as Iñaki said at the beginning, one of the premise that every exhibition had to have was to maintain a corridor of 1.20 meters to allow wheelbarrow circulate and to be able to combine the use of the storage room. So with the exhibition space, and we did only with that curtain. So many times in the middle of a visit, and hilarious picture could be given. You could see a waiter suddenly came out of the curtain loaded with ice cube of wine or bottle of olive oil. So that multiplicity of uses remind us to the short film Tango, where in a space with 3 doors and 1 window, almost 20 characters begin to appear. So each one performing a different action, but no one conflicts with the action of others. So the whole scene becomes some beautiful nonsense choreography. These drawings shows a set of diagrams of the different movement of each actor. And finally, the exhibition Territorio Común, which it was a collaboration between 6 teams of local architects: Alazabeth, Oficina de Innovación Cívica, Ofmake, Marta Torresilla, Sarayo Sorianay. All the design process work was done online for a couple of months. So as each team worked in different parts of the world. So the exhibition deal with the consumption and use of the Canarian territory. So we introduced natural grass carpet into the space, and each team developed a theoretical text around the exploitation of the island's natural and special resource. So once this exhibition finished, Zulo get closed, the curtain was taken down and folded. Thank you.
Well, thanks a lot, guys. That was excellent. as well as Stefan. Thank you again for presenting. Starting off right now, just going off of what you said, Pablo, it seems like there's quite a sadness in saying that the gallery is closed. Do you have any plans of launching another one?
You're talking to, we are three Pablo, so are you talking to me?
Yes, yes.
Actually, we had like a couples of pop-up exhibition, but only for a week. But you were not the first who asked that. So we have like a lot of pressure to do more things, but I think that for the first the first idea was only to have like 12 artists in 12 months. So make our kind of catalog, no, for that temporary time that we live. And we decide to finish because we prefer to finish. Start.
I must say that it was also like I mean, it was first an arrangement with the owner, but also at the end it was like kind of for us we had to decide just 12. So it gave us the opportunity to show like a kind of X-ray or like a photo finish of what's going on in the time in the Canary Islands. So the things which we've done, as Pablo said, like small things afterwards. For example, the last exhibition he showed, the grass carpet, it's not part of the 12 exhibitions we had. But actually we don't call it like kind of Zulo. It's like another part which we are developing, but it's like kind of another project.
So you're thinking of maybe doing another name, in the future, but just changing the name out of Zulo, or no, you're thinking of doing a continuous Zulo?
No, maybe it could be with another name. Yeah, so actually it makes more sense that you just see like the project is Zulo and it's finished, and other things will come afterwards.
Perfect. Yeah. And so just opening up to anyone else, does anyone have any questions? Because I got a whole list, but before I get going, I would just like to first, ask. I see Anna, we have never heard from you. I would love to see if you got a question, or maybe Andre. And of course, Juan, Medina, we always enjoy you and your questions. So anyone feel free to unmute. Otherwise, I'm gonna keep on asking questions.
Yeah, I have a question. Hello,
Please.
good night, everyone. In regards to Zulo, again, I would like to know, how do you think like being in contact with artists and artists' work influences your own work as an architect, actually, your other projects?
That's a really interesting question, because I think it doesn't come directly. I guess if you see it now like from a distance, maybe you could say that the most obvious things could be like more kind of using like the artworks or making these collaborations happen really in architecture field. Like it's more about the relations that you're having with these artists, so they can also give you feedback for a direct project. But I think that the what could give you more something like more positive in your work would be like that you could expand new ways to approach architectural criticism. Like, for example, in a social way, there's like a social artwork. I mean, artists, many of the artists we've been collaborating with have treated like social criticism in a way. And you could use like this kind of thinking into competitions, for example, where you could develop, where you should develop like critical skills involving social issues. It doesn't seem so obvious at first, but I think when you approach to these kind of competitions, you get to think about what you discussed before with maybe these artists that were taking like these kind of themes. yeah, I don't know, Pablo, what do you
Yeah,
think?
I was thinking that maybe not. I will not say that we are being like influenced by the artist, but I think that one of the better things that happen is that we create a kind of ecosystem, so of relations between the artists and ourselves. So because I think we are now working with some of them in some, for example, if we need a photographer for our projects, now we connect with some of the artists that we knew because of Zulo, from different things, or metal workers, or we ask some of the sculptures to have a look of some space, to have some share some ideas. So one of the things that I will think that I will say that it's one of the best influence is that kind of ecosystem that we built through Zulo.
And kind of going off that, Stefan, you teach, correct? Are you a teacher still?
I support, yes, I was teaching at Harvard last semester with Regine.
And did you learn a lot from teaching and from your students, kind of the same way they learned and were able to connect? And do you see yourself teaching in the future, or no? Do you kind of feel like I did it, I experienced it, and now it's time to move on to something else?
No, for sure. I think that I think that the line between like teacher student is kind of, you can't really draw it because it's always a process that you engage. I think that necessarily whenever you come with like a prompt, you also have questions that you want to answer to yourself. So we came with a very open question when we went. It was an extension for a Mies van der Rohe house in Berlin, and it was an experiment that we kind of like did with the students, and we had the same kind of doubts as they had, and we really had to explore it together through formats like this. So for sure, I think that it's kind of, I see teaching in a more horizontal process where you just kind of ask a question together. Yeah.
Sure, and cool. Looks like you got a question. Take it away, please.
Can you guys hear me all right? Perfect. Stefan, I had a question for you regarding your dictionaries. I'm really interested in adaptive reuse, and I was wondering what your thoughts are about kind of using these cataloging techniques to kind of determine viability of integration between the old and the new, kind of what your thoughts are on the dictionary kind of coming into play in that field.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that so a lot of these terms, like, you know, we think about adaptive reuse or timber construction, or kind of terms that that start getting thrown around, and we use them, and like they become kind of integrated into practice. But I think that because they happen at the same time, you kind of like have to take a step back and kind of catalog best practices of this. What do we mean exactly? Like, how much are you preserving? So I think that usually with these terms that are widely available and they kind of become sometimes just buzzwords, I think it's a good moment to really, okay, define them, see what we really mean, so we're talking the same way, and then from there you can develop your own position against it. How would you do your adaptive reuse? Is it like Jan de Wilder, where you kind of like want to leave, you know, really integrate a kind of, you know, very direct approach and kind of like explicit old and new? Or do you want to be more integrated, like David Chipperfield in the Noise Museum, where you kind of want to blend in with the history? So I think that these ranges and this variety is kind of where a dictionary comes in, and like making them very specific per topics can allow you to see like what is the wide range of options that you have.
Thanks, Stefan. And then you also got a question as well. What was or is a dictionary that influenced or impacted your life? I guess the biggest one, or the one that you like the most.
Right. Going off on that, I think I mentioned it. The dictionary of received ideas of Gustave Flaubert, it's basically a mock dictionary, but it was analyzing the accepted social customs of French society kind of in the 1800s. And I think that these cliches, things that are like the etiquette of the time, are precisely moments where you can start questioning, wait, when did this become etiquette? Why is this a practice that we are carrying over and over? So I think that one is more of an approach. It's not that it's my favorite, it's just an approach to question what has been taken for granted. And he was really good through like description and kind of like deep analysis, just point to kind of like some of the cliches of the time. Yeah.
Thank you. And Andrea, you have a question, please.
Yes, thank you so much, Chris. And thank you everybody for the presentations. I really enjoyed them. And I have a question for Stefan. I loved your research and all that collection of dictionaries that you have shown us. They're beautiful. But it seems to me that all of them, they're representing like a situation of details, materials, typologies in a specific moment of time. And right now we use them and we fall in love with them, but many of those practices, they have changed over time. So I wanted to know if some of these dictionaries or some of this research consider the time as a variable in the research, and if they don't, if you think as architects, as contemporary architects, that we look at them, if we should consider reviewing them or redoing them, or how do we deal with the transformations that these details or typologies have suffered?
Thank you for your question, Andrea. Yeah, this is super interesting, the question of temporality, because it's almost like as soon as you want to codify or kind of, make or share the information about a typology or a particular kind of practice or knowledge, and it's almost like you're codifying it in time, and it kind of makes it obsolete by at the time that it starts getting distributed. And of course, it depends on how widely available these guides or dictionaries are. Things like Neufeld are things that are super available, but they also are very specific of a time that we of course cannot continue doing because they come from a particular history. Dictionaries and any kind of encyclopedic project will always leave things out, and it kind of cannot keep. They're useful instruments for sure because they attempt to grasp or explain the world, but I think that is what I was trying to get to. We cannot think of typologies or history or techniques in linear ways. This is not kind of like there's not ever a complete project. So I think that we can use them, but at the same time, we have to be skeptical of them and reinterpret them and readapt them. What are also the tools of our time to compile and access information? I think the internet becomes a really enormous dictionary in a way, or an enormous encyclopedia that has its own offerings, its own limitations. What does it leave out? So I think just as any other instrument, it kind of will inform the way that practices are transferred, but but they're of the time, and that's what kind of like also makes them dated. The encyclopedia of the 18th century look like that, and they only describe that world. I think that's what I would say.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, that's a great point too. Because I was thinking about Andre Palladio and how his 4 books of architecture as well, and all he talked about was during his time period and what he's focused on. Does anyone else have any questions? Professor Barkow, come on. You're in.
Let me start with Stefan. I had a question. I mean, in terms of these kind of collections, encyclopedias or dictionaries, it seems like you're kind of presenting a history, which is interesting. And it seems like there's looking at two different types. One, which are kind of collections or dictionaries, which are things unto themselves in a way. They're sort of complete. They're an idea about that. And there's others that seem to be open to being instrumentalized. And I'm thinking something like Gerhard Richter's Atlas, which is a kind of almost like a scrapbook that he compiles and continues to add to with the idea of, say, selecting a painting to be made from one of these things. So Stefan, and I know because we work closely together and you're such a good researcher and archiver. I mean, what do you think about instrumentalizing? How do you use these things in terms of your own work or in terms of a kind of architectural project? I mean, what do you think about that? And because it seems like you'd almost say as much about that, how you use these things as the things in themselves and what the value of these things are. And when you need to sort of leave these things, you know, at the wayside.
Yeah, thank you, Frank. That's a great question. I mean, I think that what I wanted to bring today was using and instrumentalizing the notion of dictionaries and encyclopedias as a tool and as a design research kind of trigger. I think that's when these things become the most interesting. And this example of Richter is precisely one way of doing it, which is kind of associations, an endless catalog, because, well, I mean, because we work together, and I'm sure that in all of your projects, you start with something and you start compiling information and ideas, but very quickly you can end, like, you can find yourself in a completely other place. So I think is just kind of using it as a starting point and working in a kind of obsessive documentation matter, because you never know where you need to come back to it. This is the way that we consume so much information all the time. There are so many things happening that you kind of like really need to define the constraints for yourself. And then once you have like a critical mass, I think that it also of information, of references, of ideas, of sketches, I think that then what you have is like in the way that Abby Warburg did, that you kind of like see it all in your face and you kind of like are, you know, you have to confront yourself against this production. But I think that the meaning, when it becomes most interesting, is in between the things, is not just the things in themselves, is when you kind of amassed this collection of your interests, of your ideas, which ones can start cross-pollinating each other. And I think that one of them, sometimes one idea of a typology that might have worked for this context could then spark this other idea. So I think it's in that open way that you're describing. And I think that's the way that Bataille was trying to approach it too, kind of always not let it be, okay, this is a school. No, what is a school? Let's keep evaluating what things mean so that we can poke holes in certain concepts that become kind of ingrained over time, because some typologies that we overuse, they were invented by somebody at some point until they just become a word in the dictionary. So I think it's kind of that, instrumentalizing it.
Thank you, Stefan. Yeah, you just made me think of courthouses and how courthouses all around the world look exactly the same, Roman, Hellenistic, Greek style, which was invented 2,000 plus years ago, you know. But Professor Esta, do you have a question? Bye.
Chris, you're hilarious. Why don't we let Matt and Sadie ask the question, since I think they raised their hands earlier even.
There we go. Cool. Thank you, Laura. So I was curious for Stefan, because I looking at my own, like my own self, sometimes I'm like doing a design project and I find myself like designing something the same way that I designed a project, like say last semester. So like, do you see this like defining process of your like own work, using this defining process to your own work to like kind of break your own mold? Like, have you done that? Or like, have you, like, do you find that as like a useful tool?
Yes, I think it's especially useful when it's with your own work. I mean, here, I guess, and maybe to kind of expand it, because I really liked the presentation of Ofmake, and the word of constraints is the one that kind of stood out for me in their work. That kind of, you see that there are some elements that they kind of just define for themselves. Okay, this is a curtain. This is what is the bare minimum of language that I can do architecture with, and then also what are the constraints, very tight constraints in time, in budget, in COVID. What are the situation that you have, and kind of like really visualize them and state them, because I think that sometimes design processes are so complex and multifaceted that we sort of have to take them and kind of lay them out for ourselves so that we can know what we're working against. And in that process of you clarifying what you have been doing over and over, or what are your essential elements. Okay, in this gallery I did it this way, in this house I did it this way. And then I think by doing it and doing it, you will find that with the same element you can continue discovering. It's grammar, you can produce infinite amount of words with the same syllable. So I think it's kind of that of identifying what are the core elements of the way that you design, of the typologies that you're interested in, what are your core ideas. And I think having an awareness of them will allow them to instrumentalize them to produce new results. I think that is just, sometimes we're not so conscious the way that we design. So we have to take a step back and kind of do a self-analysis or psychoanalysis.
Thank you. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. By like listing it out and like throwing it out in front of you, you can get an understanding of it. And maybe, yeah, like you're saying, you don't have to, it's not necessarily bad to like repeat it, but if you're thinking about it in a different way with the same concept, you can make new and exciting things. Yeah, and then I'll pass it on to Sadie.
Yeah, I mean, I was just curious, as you build up this list of examples, is there a group of people or cultures that often get left out in this dictionary in the past that influence how we start to form it now and change our mentalities or view on these certain objects or instances?
I'm sorry, it broke up a little bit. You asked if I have a group of people that kind of shaped this process, or could you repeat the question? Sorry.
Yeah, of course. I was thinking of, like, as you build up this document of things that have happened in the past, is there a group of people or a culture that maybe gets left out of these documents that helps to really influence and change how we look at these typologies now?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, this is the question of archives, right? Of course, and archives are necessarily biased because they are by which group of people collects them, which group of people what a group of people place value on. And I think that in the profession of architecture, we've been confronting ourselves with that are the canon in which and in the last 10 to 15 years. We've been confronting ourselves. Okay, so the only stories that we teach, the ones that we archive, the ones that we preserve, are these particular histories. And it's, of course, these kind of reinforce a particular kind of architecture, leave out a lot of voices. And I think that it's one of the biggest projects of the moment to to expand the archive, expand the encyclopedia, restore the canon. And that's what we're doing. We're trying to catch up, and everybody has kind of like that responsibility to, you know, what did we leave out? What, you know, it's extremely independent, and it cannot be done by everyone, which is why, yeah, it's important to kind of, everybody has to like find the topic of their interest and contribute their part to archives. But yes, I think that it's also impossible to address it all at the same time. So I think that this is why I said, find those people, those voices that really resonate with you, because I think that that's the only way that it can be honest and it can be really instrumental. Like, your background will shape your archive. You know, I have, because of my background in Costa Rica, I will have a particular affinity to some things or others. And you can't, I think that we can't expect that we will know it all. It's just, let's try to restore the archive and create like a foundational model so that the canon is not just the one that I explained briefly, like, okay, this is from Vitruvius to modern architecture, we're done. No, that's not the history of architecture. What are we leaving out?
Bye-bye, please.
Thanks everyone. And I also wanted to, just before I like ask the question, I wanted to underline that I'm very aware that it's late over there in Europe, where many of you guys are joining us from. And I'm saying Europe like the country, but I mean because there's actually so many different people connected right now, and it's wonderful that our community is this extensive. But we know you have to go to sleep soon. Thank you for bearing with us, and I think everybody's like super interested in this conversation. To go on and on even at the late hour, because it's so fascinating, the issues that you guys have brought up in your lectures and in this discussion. And I mean, to me, one of the super striking things has been the language with which Delnu, Pablo, Delnu and Iñaki describe the project of Zulo. In a way that has these kind of super strong correlations to this world of encyclopedic or kind of an archiving or let's say a kind of work that may be resisting archiving, perhaps more in the sense of Bataille, like Stefan has pointed out. Where they speak about the multiplicity of uses of this gallery space being a kind of storage or a backdoor to a restaurant, and the kind of nonsense choreography that you were talking about, and the kind of resistance of this space to be read as any one thing in particular, and that somehow also transcending the rest of your work of Ofmake as a project that is consistently interested in flexibility and in the if there is no consistency, there is a consistency of change, so that things will always inevitably transform, and apartments can grow or get smaller, like in Alta, or the family can get larger and more chaotic, or you know, become more compact during the winter and more expanded during the summer, like your project in Germany. And I think that that's so interesting that in a way the condition of a contemporary practice right now is to defy categorization, that there is this constant flux and evolution that is not interested in belonging to a catalog, but that it's inclusive of kind of endless possibility or the unexpected in a way. And so it's a work that anticipates a kind of constant state of production or a constant state of progress. And that's kind of the connection that I make between somehow Stefan's lecture has given us the words to understand maybe your project, or even larger, how your practice is emblematic of a way of working today. And sorry, that's not a question, but I thought maybe you guys, the Ofmake guys, want to respond to that somehow.
Okay, I can. Yeah, it's not really a question, but I like the things you are bringing, like this. For example, I'm very fascinated about this simultaneity that happens in Zulo that you were talking about, and actually we discussed many times, and I talked with Iñaki and Delno about it. And yes, I don't know. Actually, Pablo SEQUERO. Last year you were in Cornell with how is the name, Pablo Menendez now?
Jesse Le Chevalier.
Yeah, Le Cavalier. Yeah, with Jesse Le Cavalier. Actually, Jesse Le Cavalier has like a lecture, and at the very beginning of the lecture, he's showing like an installation from an artist that starts with a basketball game, and suddenly a football game starts at the same time. And he's defining this moment that this simultaneity gives pressure to the other thing that is happening at the same time. And in the end, you have something extremely strong happening. That is not football, it's not basketball, but in the end, it's something mixed. But both of them have the pressure. So I think this mix in a way is happening to us because we actually work in different offices. We do Ofmake, Iñaki and Pablo are with Zulo, and we try to develop like many projects at the same time, and everything pops up again and again. And this thing about the archive and the ideas and projects and types in history, I think is something that, I mean, that Stefan also, Stefan was talking about. I think is something extremely important nowadays in the design practice that actually is not tough. Is not in a way we don't learn it in the school, at least in Madrid. And this thing about the type and history and how to instrumentalize the history, I think is something very interesting. And a project or let's say an example that I like a lot because it's about instrumentalizing, but in a way of being extremely, at least, I mean, maybe it's a bit too much, but it's this project from MBDVR, this glass farm in the Netherlands. I don't know if you know this project, but I think we talk about many times that in the end, the whole history of the type history of the farm from the Netherlands is printed in a very slim glass in the facade that is just between two glasses, and in the end, the whole history and the whole type of the farm from the Netherlands is around and still a structure that you can see even from the inside, everything that is just fake and is extremely instrumentalized. And it's a project that if you see for the first time, maybe you don't like it, but actually if you understand how the process was and everything about this theme, about being how the history can be instrumentalized, I find like extremely interesting. Yes.
Yeah, both Pablo, SEQUERO, and I put some links in the chat for while you're talking for people to look at. And I also put a PDF in the chat for you guys Ofmake that I don't want to get into, but basically I was researching how it is working with your friends. And I wanted to ask you guys about that and your experience with that. And there's these 2 articles talking about the positive benefits of working with your friends. But we're running out of time, so I just want to let Andrea have the last question, if that's okay.
Yes, if it's not too late, if we have to cut it off, it's okay. But if not, I would like. Okay, go ahead. I have a question for Ofmake and Zulo, because it feels to me that in the projects that you've presented, like the collective housing or the other bigger competitions that you've been doing, the collective is a really important part of it, no? In the housing in Sevilla and these projects that you were showing. At the same time, whenever you have showed this practice of Zulo, it's again like an interaction with locals and with artists and with the community and bringing together other uses and other activities to the space. So I was wondering that this looked like a cross interest, no, and across topics around your practice, but at the same time you are working in super different places, like in Canarias, Berlin, and Galicia. And I don't know if you are getting kind of conclusions of how this topic, this really global, has different readings on the different local contexts. It's like a conversation between all of you, or what are your thoughts about this kind of interaction with the local situation?
I guess that it's, I mean, our approaches, if you see them, the built approaches we've shown today, they're really local interventions. I mean, we come from we have like a background in international competitions in our offices. So I think this has also given us like a kind of a background to develop like ideas which are global. But at the end, the projects you see that are built are really local. So I guess it's, for me, it's like something really natural. Like it's, you start doing like small things like Zulo, which is like really cooperating with local artists and doing things by yourself. But you're always like thinking of things you've learned in a previous experience, which has been like more global. In our case, I mean, we meet together in big cities. So we studied in also in big universities, and I think this gives us like a kind of an approach to a more open view of architecture, which also gives you like the opportunity to think that architecture is not just like what you know as architecture, so traditionally what's architecture. So for example, I have the idea that when we did Zulo, we were thinking about creating in a small thing what we've been seeing in a bigger scale. So it's I think that's kind of the relation between global and local. So I mean, it seems pretty obvious, I guess, but when you see it when you do it, then afterwards you start to analyze and you say, okay, maybe this thing that I thought it was kind of natural, maybe it's because I had this background, but now it seems like, okay, you relate the dots afterwards, of course.
Thank you.
Pablo Mendez, do you have any thoughts, or you agree? I guess he agrees.
Okay, guys, I think maybe it would be a good time to wrap it, to let you go. Unless anybody has any last questions. Perfect. Well, Thanks so much, Chris, for doing such an incredible job moderating, and to everyone who's joined and participated in this conversation. It's really nice to have these kind of friendly faces that we know and have so dearly, that are so dear to us, but at the same time, to get to know your work even better, and that we can share this space to really discuss super important ideas that I think everybody agrees have this incredible value to our students. So thanks so much, and we'll see you soon, I hope.
Thank you, guys, and good luck to everybody with the rest of the semester. I look forward to see the projects hopefully sneaked through the back through Frank or something.
Thank you so much all.